Hey, and welcome back. For anyone who follows this channel, you probably already know I'm a huge fan of Gretsch drums. I've owned many different sets over the years, and I love the history behind the company. Back in May 2021, I went to the Chicago Drum Show, and I found this 60s era round badge Playboy kit for a steal of a price. I was informed that this kit was an original 20-inch bass drum and 12-inch rack tom, but the accompanying floor tom was a replica made from a Keller shell. The bearing edges, hardware, and design was done almost perfectly other than the inside of the drum not having that Gretsch signature silver sealer. I know Gretsch has always marketed their silver sealer as a signature element to their great Gretsch sound, but I know that most companies in the 50s and 60s were adding some sort of finish to the inside of their shells for more practical reasons, like hiding imperfections in wood or flaws in production. As I got this kit as a project, I decided I would try to tackle adding the silver sealer to the inside of the floor tom and try to get it even closer to matching the rest of the kit. Now, as a disclaimer, I would never do this to an actual vintage Gretsch shell, but since what I was dealing with was a replica and totally replaceable, I figured the risk would be worth it for me. I did some research on different forums, YouTube videos, and other outlets, and found that the closest match people have found is this aluminum paint, and decided I would go to my local hardware store and pick some up and refinish the inside of this shell myself. Once I had my supplies, I was ready to start prep for this project. I stripped off all my hardware currently on the drum, including tension rods, batter and resonant hoops, lugs, floor tom brackets, and finally the badge. One of the signature features of these round badge era drums was a badge that was not attached to the shell through a grommet, but a tack. I've never worked with these before and struggled to find a lot of information online about removing those badges. And everywhere I asked, people kept referring me to videos of grommet removal. If you look on the inside of the drum, you'll find the tack pressed down horizontally into the shell, and it's as simple as carefully prying that tack up to straight again. In this case, I used a razor blade to get underneath the tack, and then once I got it a little bit up, I used a set of pliers to straighten it out and pull the tack through the front. After finally having all my hardware removed, I could go ahead and tape up the holes from the outside to avoid any bleed of the paint over to the outside of the shell. I recommend not cheaping out on generic brands of tape and getting something a bit more suited for this, like 3M sharp line tape. After getting all the holes through the body of the shell, I taped up the bearing edges and went back and trimmed the tape right to the bearing edge to get a clean transition from the outside to the inside of the shell. Once everything was taped up, I went and added some paper to mask the outside of the shell, just in case I had any overspray in the process of painting this shell. And after that, it was time to bring the drum up to the garage and begin spraying the finish to the inside of the shell. I usually like to use a Lazy Susan for this kind of work, but with getting to the inside of the shell, it was easiest to lay it down on its side and cradle it between some scraps to keep the drum from rolling while I was working with it. I did the first coat and I still had a fair amount of grain coming through, so I went back later and added a second coat. Even after the paint had dried, I noticed it getting on my hands as I'd touch the shell, so I went in with a damp paper towel and got any loose paint particles off, and this project was wrapped. Now, if you compare the original silver sealer to the current, you'll notice the older is much more aged and darkened up with some nicks and scuffs on the finish. I couldn't really expect to match that same distressed look with a brand new paint job, but I think I got within the margin of error for the color. When I compare it to the newer Gretsch drums, like my Renown or New Classic kit, it's a little more on par with those drums. I know some purists will surely give me grief on this project, but again, I did not alter any true Gretsch shell, and I think for this project it was a nice way to get this replica drum even closer to the original vintage drums I have with this kit. If I could go back and do it again, I wish I would have taken a before and after sound sample to see if we have any real difference sonically now with the shell being painted, but this project was part of a larger remodel of this drum set, which will be coming on my channel soon, so stay tuned for that. If you've ever tried something like this, I'd love to hear about it, so leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on my latest video releases. Until next time, thanks.